Welcome to the Morning Route Podcast. I am your host, Shane Johnson. We've got something for transportation pros, educators, parents, and everyone who appreciates the important role school buses play in our education system. So grab your favorite cup of coffee and let's hit the road. Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Morning Route Podcast. Glad you could all join us today. I have with us today our guest, Pam. She's an operations manager here with Palmer Bus Service. I stole a little bit of her thunder already, but Pam, if you take just a minute to introduce yourself to our guests.
I'm Pam Boomgaarden. I'm the operations manager for some of the northern sites in Palmer Bus Service. I oversee about 6 sites in the northern region. I oversee the operations, a conduit between the sites.
Yeah, and with that, I know some of the sites that you do oversee as the operations manager are some of the larger sites at Palmer Bus Service. We have Shakopee, Princeton, St. Cloud, Little Falls. So yeah, some of our larger sites that you do oversee. So a lot of responsibility every single day that you carry. And thank you for what you do for Palmer Bus Service and making us a great company. So appreciate all that. Outside of the working hours, outside of the 4 walls of Palmer Bus Service, what do you enjoy? Your hobbies, spending time doing?
I like to read. I read a lot of Stephen King books.
Okay, yeah.
I have my Stephen King collection.
Very educational.
Yes, of course. Takes me out of reality for a little while.
Sure.
I really enjoy rock hunting. The last several years, I've gotten into rock hunting a little more.
Rock hunting.
Rock, yes. I like my rocks. Okay. Yes, I've hunted for agates along Lake Superior. Took a trip up to the UP and went rock hunting up there along the Superior Shore as well.
What do you do with the rock when you find it? What happens?
I bring it home. I have a rock tumbler. I tumble some of them, not all of them. I have done a little bit of hand polishing as well, which is a little more grueling.
Okay.
I have boxes of rocks.
Okay, wonderful.
Some of them just sitting around waiting to have something done with them.
So your kids and grandkids will one day inherit rocks.
Yes, they will.
Yes, okay.
Yes, they will.
I'm sure they're looking forward to that.
Yes.
Right. So do you ever, with that, do you ever find fossils?
Yes,
Okay.
I actually have a little small collection of fossils.
What's the neatest or coolest one or that you found that you have?
The coolest one is I haven't cut it open. I have cut some rocks open as well. I have a tile saw, a wet tile saw that I use. And I haven't cut this one open, but it looks like it's a fossil inside of a chunk of quartz.
Okay.
When you look at it in regular light, it looks like an ugly rock. And when you put a flashlight up to it and the light shines through the quartz, it looks like there's an alien growing inside of it. It's pretty cool.
Neat.
It's like one of the coolest rocks I have.
Very neat. So the next time you come on the show here, you're going to have to bring that with you to show myself and our guests in.
I will.
Okay, perfect. I look forward to it. Is there a way, just one more question within that, is there a way, like when you're looking at that, can you tell that's not a rock, that's a fossil, or how do you know? Or don't you know?
Sometimes you don't. It's a matter of, like, when you're hunting rocks, I'd sometimes bring a bottle of water with me or a spray bottle because, they're full of gunk, and you look for something that looks a little off or unique. Like when you're hunting for agates, you can see if they're wet and the sun hits them, you can tell.
All right.
It's hard to explain.
Years of experience, though, right? Yeah, you got it. Thanks for that walkthrough. Very much appreciate it. Talking about, again, today, you're an operations manager here with Palmer Bus Service. You've been in this position now for, a couple years?
Yes.
Okay. Prior to that, you were a site manager for several years at Shakopee. Mm-hmm. Prior to becoming a site manager at Shakopee, you were
assistant manager.
And prior to being the assistant manager, you were
special ed coordinator.
Prior to that,
I was a part-time trip driver.
There we go.
I drove sports trips.
Yeah, the genesis of where you're at today, but the genesis, you started off as a driver.
Yes.
So you have really just ran through the gamut, if you will. Been there, done that. Your T-shirt could say driving, regular route, special ed routes, trips, activities. And I know lately with your role, you're very helpful to your site managers. And there's some times that you find yourself back in the seat having to drive, correct? And recently you've had to help out a few times, and thank you for that. Looking at transporting students today, children today, to 5 years ago, to 10 years ago, not special ed, but just regular ed. What are some differences that you have seen, again, 10 years ago to where we're at today with transporting students?
10 years ago when I was driving, I was only driving trips.
Okay.
Driving trips is a lot different than driving a regular gen ed route. You have a coach on the bus. It's a lot more fun. The students get pumped up and play music. And I guess the difference in the transportation, I honestly don't see a whole lot of difference. Okay. Maybe more of that difference comes in the regulation and laws, state laws versus federal laws, things like that. The kids, I think, seem
kids are still the same?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, it's interesting your perspective on that and talking to other people within the industry. And maybe it's just place to place. I don't know, but talking to others, I think there's more of a theme or a common theme about it's becoming more difficult for maybe on the student management side. Kids' behavior seems to, I don't know if it's increase or decrease of how they interact or act on the bus and listen or don't listen. And it's becoming more difficult for the drivers to handle that student behavior on the bus. But so it's, I guess, a little bit encouraging for you to say, I guess I haven't noticed it.
Yeah. Since I've been driving regular gen ed routes, I haven't really noticed a lot of change. But like I said, I was a trip driver before, so I've only been driving gen ed routes for probably 6-7 years.
How about with technology? Obviously, there's just technology, it's constantly changing, which is great, and it's very important for us to keep up with it. I think in the school bus world, we've probably always been a little bit behind or slow to go to technology for whatever reason in the school bus world, or that was the case for many years. But I think in today's world, it is. School buses are full of technology, whether the buses are being manufactured that way, which is great, but even with the technologies that we put on our buses after the fact, after we get them, from cameras to zone and all of that, do you think that maybe has had an impact on student behavior? Like, hey, they know that there's cameras on the bus, and
I think you're right. That probably is one of the biggest changes in the last several years of transportation is the technology out there. Even when I was driving trips, we had cameras in the buses, but you couldn't hardly see anything. They were not very good quality cameras, and the volume, the audio was not good either. I think that the cameras in the buses and the stop arm cameras outside of the buses, as people catch wind of that technology in the bus, on the bus, it makes it a little easier.
Right.
We've had cameras save bus drivers, and we've had cameras catch bus drivers. We've had cameras catch kids. Sometimes you think that's the one kid that's causing the problem, but it was the other one when you watch the video footage. So it's really made a difference, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think you said something that is so important. I remember when cameras first started coming, like you said, they're very grainy and it was hard to really see and make out anything. But again, today, everything is crisp. You can hear everything. You can see everything.
You can even zoom in.
Yeah, the technology is incredible. You can watch things in live time now. As the bus is driving its route, you can pull it up on your computer and watch in live time what's taking place on the bus. But I remember, again, that first time that cameras were really getting introduced and hearing drivers back then going, they were so resistant to cameras being put on their bus, right? Like, you're just trying to catch me with something. And so if you're not doing anything, then you don't have anything to worry about. But that was a huge resistance back in the day where, again, like what you just said, cameras are here, yes, for our students and student behavior. And I don't always mean like in a negative way to catch. So many times things on there that are really like, I can't believe I just saw those kids helping maybe another kid. So in a positive light. But same with drivers, seeing drivers give high fives and good mornings, and you're watching on the camera. That's really inspiring to see that great positive student driver interaction. But yeah, there's times where the cameras are there and they can catch a driver. No, you did say what you said, or that did happen or didn't happen. So it goes both ways. And I think, my opinion, overall, it's been for the positive, having the cameras on the buses. And like you said, even the stop arm cameras as well.
I agree.
Yeah. With that, a question for you as you said you oversee 6 different site managers, 6 different school districts as well. Have you seen, and please don't name the district, but have you seen a district where, yeah, they do really, really well with student management? Like the conversation that happens, the communication happens back from our office, our staff to the school district staff, and in that student management. Because I think it is fair to say there are school districts out there that, hey, we want to know, we truly partner with you. If something's happening or not happening, we're here to help. And it's fair to say there's other districts like they're just not engaged. Doesn't matter how maybe naughty the student is, they're not going to get kicked off the bus, or they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to help correct behaviors. Have you seen that in your role?
I have. The districts really vary, and sometimes it varies within the district. Sometimes within the district, you're dealing with several different schools. And it depends on the person at the school that is supposed to be helping manage that behavior on the bus. Are they responding? Are they responding to bus referrals? Our drivers get really discouraged when they write up bus referrals and they get sent to the school and they never hear back.
Sure.
Maybe the school is doing something, maybe they're not, but the drivers never hear back. So they just give up altogether on writing up referrals. They're like, I'm not going to spend my time writing this up when no one does anything about it. And sometimes I have had conversations with a district extensive conversations about this a while back. And when they realized the impact it was having by not getting back to us, sometimes we don't see the consequence. Sometimes the consequence is within the school.
Right.
Maybe they have detention. Maybe they have to eat lunch in the principal's office. Maybe they don't get recess, whatever it might be.
Right.
And if we don't hear back that those consequences are happening, we think nothing's happening.
Right. That's fair.
The consequence isn't always getting kicked off the bus. It could be something else.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you said, and is having that communication. And I think it is important we don't have to know every piece of it, right? And the driver doesn't need to know every piece of it. But I think we're all just wired that way. Like when we want to know, did something happen? Did something take place? Because we're trying to be proactive on the front end and let the district know, hey, here's what was taking place. So it's reassuring that when we can go back to the driver and say, hey, just want you to know this is what took place. The student's not going to get suspended from the bus. X happened. And more times than not, the drivers are like, okay, thanks for following up. I appreciate knowing that. Positive comes from that. So again, very simple communication. The back and forth can save frustrations on both ends.
Yes.
So yeah, it's good to hear that there are districts that you work with that are very proactive in that. So again, very positive. I appreciate hearing that. So I want to do a deep dive with you here today, talk about special education and special ed transportation. I know that you recently just attended the Students with Disabilities Transportation Conference, or Transporting Students with Disabilities Conference, put on by ST. Shout out to Tony and Ryan and their team for putting that on. Great conference that they have. So I think you spent, 5 days?
5 days, yes.
5 days down there. So
5 days of about 6 to 8 hours in conference rooms.
Yeah, they pack a lot in there.
Yes.
Again, just a great conference. And it's one of those things where there's so much information, which is great. I never want them not to give all that information. But again, if you can leave there and retain like 20-25%, I think you're doing really well, right? Because again, but it's something that you need to go to again and again, make those connections, hear the next speaker, because again, there's so much just great information coming, especially with special education, because there are so many rules and regulations, and it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. So for you attending, and I think this was the first time you got to attend, what was your biggest takeaway? Wow.
My biggest takeaway was, it is a lot of information. My biggest takeaway, I believe, it would be the de-escalation techniques. Yeah. They really dove deep into de-escalation and understanding unlocking autism was one of the sessions. A lot of it tied together, even though it was two different keynote speakers one was talking about de-escalation techniques, the other was talking about unlocking autism, but they both really tied together. It was a lot of good information and understanding. It gives you a better understanding of how your approach, what you do, what you say, little things, and how they really affect students with disabilities.
So with that, let's just tap into that a little bit. With de-escalation, what are some tips? What did you hear at the conference that you can share for our listeners today, that some great tips and that they could start practicing immediately today, tomorrow on their bus to give a better ride for the students?
One of the best tips that I could give, and there's a few of them, but one of the best ones I believe is not matching the behavior of the student that you're dealing with. If they're fast and loud and moving faster, talking faster, being loud, then you need to do the opposite. You should be approaching them with slow body movements,
Okay.
slow speech. When a lot of the times people think that if you're dealing with a student who's having a difficult time, a challenging behavior, you need to stand your ground. You got to stand your ground and you need to be the authority and you need to, that's not the case.
It's almost the opposite.
It is. Yeah. It is. It causes an opposite effect on them and it just escalates the behavior.
Right.
It really does.
I don't know if you saw my notes, but I have notes here about de-escalation, and I really didn't. I had no idea you were going to say that was my biggest takeaway was de-escalation. So I wanted to talk about that. Some things that I just had on my notes, and shoot holes in them, please. With dealing with students with special needs is having. I wrote down just a few things: clear language, being respectful to them, and calm. So again, tying into exactly what you just said, not matching their behavior. So yeah, just stay calm and talk to them respectfully, versus matching that energy, which more times than not, it's a loser, right? It's a losing proposition that you're doing. Building trust with the students. Try to do that right away. That first time that student gets on your bus is to start building trust with them.
Yes.
Being fair, I think that's a huge thing. Students with disabilities understand fairness, right? And be fair, be consistent with whatever it is, right? Otherwise, you're confusing the student by not being fair and consistent with them.
Correct.
And I had, again, that positive behavior, praising good behavior. Make sure that you're reassuring the student that, hey, that was a great ride today. High fives and everything else, and making sure that they understand, like, hey, that was good. We did good today. So again, I think we're all that way. It's very frustrating when all the feedback's always negative. Like people point out what you did wrong when probably 90% of the time did everything right. But we want to focus on the 10%, and then be sure that we point that out in whatever it is and whoever it is, right? Did I ever do anything that's positive? So yeah, point out the positive. And lastly, I had, again, and I know you're going to have some others to add to it, I'm sure, but just showing empathy to the students, right? Being warm, being welcome as well, that patience, all of that tying together. And I'm no special ed expert at all. There's a gal, she retires and then unretires. Maybe she was at the conference, Dr. Linda Bluth. Have you heard her name before? She is the expert, my opinion, the expert of all experts in specialized transportation. But check her out if you haven't, Dr. Linda Bluth. If I could know probably 1% of what she knows, I would be probably one of the best folks in Minnesota anyways with dealing with special education. Check her out. Did you see her at the conference? Or
I don't know. I'm not really sure. There was a lot of sessions. Okay. I don't remember all of the names.
So any other insight then with the de-escalation piece that you heard there, again, that you can bring to our listeners here today?
Yeah, I talked about the tone that you're using and to not match their energy. Another thing is approach. When you're approaching a student who's having a difficult time, to remember proximity. They're probably already sitting in a bus seat, so stop a bus seat before. Okay. Don't tower over them like you're a big authority. And when you approach them, a really interesting thing that I learned was where your hands are, what your hands are doing. To be aware, when your palms are up, it's less threatening to someone. Not that you want to walk up to them and go like this, but when you're talking to them, you can do this with your hands and bring it out from the core of your body and just use your hands. When your palms are facing down,
Almost like in a fist, like you
Yeah,
were showing.
it's almost an aggression thing, because when you do make a fist, your palms are down. When you put your hands on your hips, your palms are down. When you point at somebody, your palms are down. So that was really interesting.
That is interesting.
I do want to start utilizing that myself and trying that out, because I think it would be just you're calming them and not even realizing it. There's another one that a lot of people do. If a student is really upset, they will go up to them and maybe grab their hand and start rubbing. They'll start rubbing their hand. It's causing friction, probably doesn't feel good, and it's probably causing them anxiety.
Okay.
And they had said that when it's okay to touch their hand and touch them if they like to be touched, but just softly use the back of your hand to touch the top of their hand. And don't rub vigorously, because if you put the two tops together,
Sure.
you can't really rub too much, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it's very interesting. I'd never heard that before. So again, it's just, again, the need, again, thank you for Tony and Ryan for putting on that conference every year. It is so needed. The tips that the experts in the industry give, and you're able to come back with this information, these resources to, again, help all of us provide what that student needs when she or he is on the school bus or in that type 3 van for, again, just a safe ride, a good ride, right? Like, we want them to be comfortable when we're transporting them. So again, just thanks for sharing that today. So I know you're going to have much more to come with it, and it's hard to pack it all in here too on just one sit down. But what would be some training resources that are ready, available, that people could seek out and get to, again, help them at their sites, at their locations, to have those trainings with their drivers and their aides?
The best resource they could use is their school district.
There you go. Okay.
I would really highly recommend developing that relationship with your school district. Every school district will have a special education department. I have actually done it before. When I was managing, I got the district involved with our drivers, and they were more than happy to provide us, and it's not like they charged us anything. They provided us with a training that they use for their paras, their aides, their teachers, and they set up a special day just for our drivers to come in.
Right.
And I think at that time it was a de-escalation training.
Okay.
Talked about different things that they use. I think it's really important to get involved with the district because, for one, they will give you ideas of the verbiage that they use with the students. If you have a student on your bus that's being loud and you're saying, use your inside voice, use your inside voice. You need to be quiet, use your inside voice. A teacher comes on the bus, if you call for help. Teacher comes on the bus and says, Susie, level 2. Boom, done.
Okay.
Because the verbiage makes a big difference. Right. You need to have a calm body. You need to have calm hands. They use a completely different verbiage than we would use.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you 100%. And I just had this conversation a couple weeks ago with somebody as well, and we were talking about that, getting training and whatnot for drivers and the pairs at one of the locations. And I said, call the school district. They will, I know this for a fact, they will be more than happy to send a person or two over and do training and provide those resources. They are truly the experts, right? And they do want to partner, I believe, with us to, again, provide us the tools, the resources, again, to, like what you're just talking about, level 2. I would have had no clue, right? We're almost talking in gibberish sometimes to that student they don't understand.
Right.
But if there's a key word that maybe helps trigger them and, hey, okay, this is what this means. This is the behavior that's being expected from me. Like, why would we not want to tap into that? Yeah.
Yes.
Call the school district. Yeah.
Yes.
They will.
And there's, of course, a wealth of knowledge online, right? If I'm not really well versed in special education, I could go online and I could find a lot of resources online.
Right.
But if I haven't been dealing with this for many years, I can go online and I can try to teach my drivers myself But it's not going to be as effective
No.
as someone that's done it for a long time and dealt with it for a long time.
Yeah. Like I said, anytime that you can tap in and get the experts to come in, that's the best way to go. Really, the only thing you have to facilitate is setting up the meeting, making the phone call, right? Can you be here Wednesday at 10 to 11:30 and get some coffee made and some donuts and everything else and have the experts come in? And like I said, 9 times out of 10, they're more than happy to partner with that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Tap into the school district. So I had a question from a listener that reached out. With winter coming, a lot of times, obviously, the kids get packed into the big puffy coats and the snow pants and all that good stuff. And they look like the wood tick that's ready to pop, right, as they're getting on the bus. But the question is, sometimes students are in a 5-point harness, and then they're getting on with all the puffies and everything else. And maybe that struggle with the harness situation or the what they're wearing. And the question was, like, is there a better way, a better system to help maybe facilitate that harness system with what the kids are wearing? I don't. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'm doing the question justice that was asked to me.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about because I've dealt with it.
Okay.
And it can turn into a struggle with all of it. Getting even if the straps are completely loosened, getting over all of that and getting those straps buckled can cause pinch points.
Okay.
Can be really uncomfortable for a student, especially a student with special needs that doesn't really understand what's going on. And why are you hurting me? They're thinking, why are you hurting me?
That's a good
So
point.
it
Good
can
point.
be a struggle. My suggestion would be to take that coat off, keep the bus warm. As long as the bus is warm,
Okay.
take that coat off. You don't have to completely strip down out of their snow pants and all that kind of stuff, but even just taking the coat off and then buckling them up, you can always put the coat back over the top of them and tuck it in so that they can stay warm that way as well. But
Good advice.
I would say take the coat off.
With that then too, let me ask, is that something like when you're doing that, is that something you want to tell the parent and maybe the school? Okay, just so you know, in order to provide a comfortable ride for the student, we're taking Sarah's coat off, and because what you described, the pitch points or whatever that might be, is that something you want to have those conversations with so people understand? Like mom and dad know, school knows?
I would for sure. I would just to avoid any kind of conflict there with ideas of why are you doing this?
Why are you taking my kid's coat off?
Right. And honestly, they advocate for that now. I've seen commercials on TV that say you should when you buckle your children into their car seats, you should take their coat off because it allows too much space in between the harness straps and the body.
Interesting.
So they are saying you're supposed to take their coat off.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. That's great to know. To me, the thing that comes back is communication. And I think the more that we communicate, again, with parents and the school about maybe why or what's taking place on the bus, because we talked about earlier, if the school doesn't tell us what the consequence was, we don't know. And now we're wondering, and maybe frustration boils up and animosity or whatever that might be. And for a parent, it might be the kid comes home or goes to school and says, they're taking my stuff off on the school bus. And maybe there's questions that are going to probably get formulated, like, why are you doing this? So again, if we could communicate more on the front end, okay, this is what we're doing and the why, it could probably eliminate frustrations within that. It could even change possibly like, mom, okay, hey, thanks for letting me know. Is there a different coat that I should maybe put on or something to that effect?
True. Yes.
So again, communication is the key.
I agree.
Yeah. So in Minnesota, I'm going to guess nationwide it's probably about the same. But going off of Minnesota, we are knocking on 20%. So 1 in 5 students being transported in Minnesota are special needs. That's a big number.
It is.
About a few years back, I don't remember exactly how many, but the number was around 110,000. Just a few years ago, now we're about 150,000 students in Minnesota are transported with special needs. And Minnesota, like I said, about 1 in 5, so we're at about 20%. A question I have for you, because you've been in this world for a while, would you attribute anything to that increasing number, like the why? I know I talked to other people and they have They're thinking caps on why this number continues to go up year after year. For me, this is just my opinion. This has nothing to do with the company or anything. It's just my opinion. Sometimes I scratch my head a little bit, and I guess I'll put my taxpayer hat on, is we have more and more programs and more programs. Again, and if somebody can tell me the why, that's probably what I'm looking for so I could have a better understanding of it. I would think with more programs and more specialized training, the work would be to work that out so kids are not in special education, right? They're back in that reg ed or back on the reg bus. But it seems to continue to grow and grow. And I had a lawmaker once tell me what they think, but I won't share that today. But it was really interesting what he told me. And it was like, okay, that makes sense. So that's probably where some of my thinking comes from it. But why does the number continue to increase? Do you have any thoughts?
Yes, actually. I think it's because special transportation is an easy button sometimes. We have students with disabilities that are on IEPs on reg ed buses. You know that.
Right.
Sometimes you might have somebody on a reg ed bus that you don't even know that they're special needs. When they start having difficult problems, when that student starts having difficult problems on the reg ed bus, instead of coming up with a solution or getting creative and trying to maintain that student to stay on that bus, we put them on a special ed bus. I think maybe that's one of the reasons it's increased. And you talked about the programs too. With all of the different programs that they're developing that are specialized for students with special needs, they're not always in the same building.
Right.
I think the more programs that we get outside of the mainstream classroom, it's going to call for more transportation because they're going to a completely different building. They're not going to the same school.
That's a good point. Yeah, I would agree with you. Again, this is just my opinion, your opinion, and everyone's entitled to opinion. So just because it's our opinion doesn't mean it's an official statement from Palmer Bus Service. I have seen it, and I've been doing this long enough, where I have seen a student on a reg ed bus with negative behavior within 48 hours had an IEP and had van service, type 3 van service. And I'm like, what just happened here? Because maybe a pink slip went home with them or went to the school asking for a 3-day suspension, and it came back versus an email back or, yep, let's do a 3-day suspension from the school bus. It came back within 2 days with an IEP to specialized transportation. And it was like, what just happened here? So,
it was the easy button.
And again, this is just my opinion. I want to be very clear on this, my opinion. My frustration is, as a taxpayer, I have absolutely no issue with my dollars going towards students and families that truly need that special education, truly need that specialized transportation. All day long, 100%. I want that to happen because it's needed. What upsets me is the abuse of it. And my opinion, I do know there's abuse in it. And it's very frustrating because I've seen it. And I just, like I said, I've seen the IEP come back. And within that, as again, many years even as being a site manager for many years, never one time have I ever been invited to an IEP meeting.
It's interesting that you say that. That's one of the things that I took back from the conference as well. They really push that transportation should be involved in IEP meetings. Not that we can make it to everyone for every student, but we really should. And there are some districts that they do have transportation involved in the IEPs, but not a lot.
I don't know if I could name somebody that's ever reached out to me and said, hey, you're not going to believe this, I got invited to an IEP meeting. So I scratched my head on that one again a little bit, and I agree with you. You can't make every IEP meeting. But what I do think is important, especially if there's a student that is, say, wheelchair bound or has seizures, prone to seizures, I don't know how transportation's not part of that. And I think maybe the state of Minnesota, I want to encourage our legislators when they start meeting this spring to maybe look at that and consider that and make that a mandatory piece, that transportation needs to be a part of those. Again, when you sometimes are dealing with students that, again, have a really specialized IEP and there's something health critical, wheelchair bound, we are here to provide safe transportation. And within that, comfortable transportation is the best that we can. And sometimes we don't know the ins and outs because all we get is a piece of paper saying you need to start transporting Sarah tomorrow.
Yes.
And I don't know what to do with this, right? And then on top of that, think about it this way. Oftentimes we have sub-drivers or a sub-para, and they don't know because we don't know, and then they don't know maybe what is really special or unique about this student and this student. And again, like what you talked about earlier, how to interact with them, maybe what a word is or gesture is with them. So I think, again, it's so important that we are a part of those IEP meetings, especially the first time that student is being asked or required to be in a van or on a little yellow school bus, so that we need to be a part of that.
I agree. One thing that I thought about was when a special needs student comes into a new school district. They live somewhere else. They're now coming into a new school district. They moved. There's a lot of planning that goes into that. A lot of planning. Their teams get together. They exchange information. They might even go to the previous school before they move and see what their day looks like. We don't get that for transportation.
Right.
Like you said, we just get a piece of paper that says they're in a wheelchair, they need a 5-point harness, they need this, or whatever it is that they need specifically just to safely ride.
Right.
We don't get a lot of the information that there's no planning.
Yeah.
And then we put them on the bus. The driver doesn't know them.
I've actually been told this before by school officials. Well, that's confidential.
Yes.
And I'm like,
yes.
Like their medical needs is confidential. Like we're supposed to transport them. Like, well, shouldn't we know a piece? And again, it's not like we're going to go post things on Facebook or whatever, but I've actually been told that less confidential. So again, I scratch my head.
I've been told the same thing. There's some districts that will give us 5 sheets of paper, like the entire IEP. And there's other districts that will not share anything.
Right.
Health stuff thing, because I don't know if they believe that it's a HIPAA violation, but it's not.
But they do. Not. But they do believe that.
I think they do.
Yeah. Again, so I'm not sure where that comes from. So again, if anybody in St. Paul, our elected leaders, hopefully listen to this, we're just asking for a little assistance so we can provide the best, safest transportation for our students. That's all. To me, that's all we're asking.
Right.
So again, yeah, going back to being part of that original conversation, and I know, Pam, you've seen this too, and this is a frustration for everybody out there, is again, getting that piece of paper saying, hey, you need to start tomorrow or you need to start Tuesday providing transportation. And we know sometimes that's just not possible. Like it's not. And again, if we were part of that original meeting that maybe took place 2 weeks ago, hey, we're looking at specialized transportation for Sarah. And again, we're part of that. We have like maybe a 2-week lead in to start looking at routes. Maybe we have to buy a different vehicle versus getting something and then telling 2 days you have to start this, and we don't have a van. We don't have maybe a route set up or whatever that might look like. So again, lead time to me is very critical.
Yes.
So that would be very helpful.
That and simple information. For example, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, there was a student he was a special needs student, but typically he walked into the bus, sat in a seat. He broke his leg. And so he's now in a wheelchair. So we have to provide a wheelchair bus for him. We provided the wheelchair bus. We had one bus that was a 2 wheelchair capacity.
Okay.
And we had room on it. So we put him on that route because it made sense geographically and the whole works. We get to the house. We can't get him on the bus because his leg is straight out. He didn't fit. Oh. That little bit of information like that is crucial.
Yeah, it's critical. Yeah. So, yeah, again, so that's our ask. If we could just be a part, and then we can do, I believe we could do our role so much better. Again, we look at this, it's a partnership, and we're here to provide a service, and we want to provide the best service that we possibly can for every student that we transport. So with that, we'll wind down. Is there anything, Pam, that you want to quickly share before we sign off? And like I said, you're going to come back. There's a lot to special ed that we're going to peel back. We'll probably get into some more political avenues with this, with, the federal law and how maybe that marries with our state laws and the do's and don'ts and all of that. And you touched on a couple things like with HIPAA being one. And so I'd like to explore that a little bit more in the future. But today I thought was very good. Just that de-escalation piece is critical. So hopefully some people take that away. But is there anything else that you just want to share before we go?
I would say that use your resources like we talked about. The school isn't the only resource. There's more out there, but use your resources. A company like Palmer, where we have 28 different districts and sites around Minnesota, you can even use another site for a resource. Or maybe it's your neighboring school district. They have a different transportation company. Ask them if they have any training resources. Reach out, make those connections. Networking is really important too.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I'm glad you shared that. And I would say outside of Palmer, we're here for students across the state, across the country, and network with other contractors, network with school districts. That maybe it's a neighboring school district that provides their own transportation, their own busing, but make a contact there and see how we could share resources. Again, at the end of the day, it's about kids, and that's what we're all about, and we want to do the best by them.
Absolutely.
So, no, thanks for that. So the most important question, and this is where we end, is here at the Morning Route podcast. To start, the morning route starts with coffee, right? No bus leaves a terminal without a driver having a cup of coffee or two. It just doesn't happen. But so in our world, coffee is very important. If you had the opportunity to sit down with one person, doesn't matter the time, 1800s, 1700s, till to today, who would that be? A person that's inspired you, or a person you just find fascinating or interesting? I just want 30 minutes with this person.
You're probably going to laugh at me a little bit for this one, but I'm going to go back to it. I would say Stephen King.
Okay.
I would love to pick his brain and see where some of this stuff comes from.
I think the first question to me is like, what is wrong with you?
I'm sure.
Yeah. So, no, that would be a fun conversation.
It would be.
Yeah, to see what goes on inside his head. And the guy's had an incredible career. I've read many of his books. I can't say I probably have in the last 20 years or so, but back in the day, I read a lot of Stephen King, and pretty good author.
Yes.
Yeah, how he comes up with some stuff I probably don't want to know.
So. That's true.
So, no, with that, thank you, Pam, for joining us today. I very much appreciate your time, and you'll be back.
Yes, I will.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
All right, thanks for joining us at the Morning Route podcast. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Stay up to date with the podcast by following us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the Morning Route podcast YouTube channel.